Imagine walking into a room where 10 people suddenly burst into laughter. 9 of them are laughing at a joke you never heard. 1 of them isn't laughing at all, yet within a heartbeat, your mind asks a question. What if they're laughing at me? Nothing has happened. No one has looked in your direction. No one has spoken your name. And yet your body responds as though a verdict has already been delivered. Your heart beats a little faster. Your thoughts begin searching for evidence. Did I say something wrong? Do I look strange? Did I embarrass myself without realizing it? It's remarkable how quickly the human mind can transform uncertainty into accusation. Not because it has proof, but because it cannot tolerate the absence of certainty. Most of us know this feeling. Walking into a room where conversations suddenly go quiet. Sending a message that receives no reply. Hearing people whisper as you pass by. Posting something online, then returning again and again to measure a reaction that may never come. It's easy to believe we're surrounded by an invisible audience. A crowd quietly evaluating every word, every mistake, every flaw. But what if that audience exists mostly inside our own minds? What if one of the greatest prisons we will ever inhabit isn't built by society or by strangers, but by the stories we tell ourselves about what other people might be thinking? Because once the fear of judgment takes root, it rarely stays confined to our thoughts. It begins making decisions on our behalf. The opportunities we decline, the conversations we never start, the dreams we postpone until we feel ready, even the version of ourselves we allow the world to see. What begins as a passing fear slowly becomes an invisible architect, shaping a life built around avoidance instead of possibility. In this documentary, we'll explore why the human mind is so deeply sensitive to judgment, how this invisible prison quietly constructs itself, and more importantly, how to recognize the door that was there all along. If understanding people fascinates you, if you're drawn to ideas that continue unfolding long after the screen goes dark, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing and join us as we explore the hidden psychology behind the human mind. Every documentary asks a different question. This one may change the way you interpret your own thoughts or the people around you. If it does, I'd be interested to hear your perspective in the comments. What's one moment in your life when you cared more about what people might think than what was actually true? Now, let's begin. The audience that doesn't exist. Imagine you're wearing a brand new shirt. As you leave home, you notice a small stain near the bottom. It's barely visible. Most people would never notice it. Yet for the rest of the day, you keep pulling your jacket closed. You hesitate before walking into crowded spaces. You wonder how many people have already seen it. By the time you return home, you've spent hours managing a flaw that almost certainly existed only in your own awareness. Not a single person mentioned the stain, most likely, because not a single person noticed it. Moments like this are far more common than we realize. A word we wish we hadn't said. A stumble on the sidewalk. A voice that cracks during a presentation. An awkward silence that feels impossibly long. To us, these moments become unforgettable. We replay them with remarkable precision, examining every detail as though they were defining chapters of our lives. But to everyone else, they're usually forgotten almost as quickly as they happened. Why does the mind create such a dramatic difference between how we see ourselves and how the world actually sees us? The answer begins with one of the simplest truths about human nature. Every person experiences life from the center of their own story. Just as your attention naturally returns to your own thoughts, everyone else's attention returns to theirs. The stranger passing you on the street isn't studying your appearance. They're thinking about a conversation they regret, a deadline they're trying to meet, or a problem waiting for them at home. The colleague sitting across from you isn't replaying your awkward sentence from yesterday. They're replaying one of their own. Human beings are far less occupied with judging us than we imagine. Not because they're unusually kind, but because they're occupied by the same concerns that occupy us: their own lives, their own mistakes, their own insecurities. Yet our minds quietly place us at the center of every scene. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the spotlight effect. We instinctively overestimate how much other people notice us because our own experiences are impossible to step outside of. The spotlight feels real. It follows every mistake, every hesitation, every imperfection. But the spotlight isn't shining from the outside. It's being projected from within. And once we mistake that inner light for external reality, our behavior begins to change. We stay silent when our ideas deserve to be heard. We avoid opportunities that might transform our lives. We hide parts of ourselves that never needed hiding. Little by little, the prison begins constructing itself, not with walls, not with locks, but with imagined eyes that were never truly watching. And perhaps the most dangerous part is that after living beneath this imagined spotlight long enough, we stop asking whether it was ever there at all. The prison we build for ourselves. Picture yourself in a meeting. You have an idea, a good one. You've thought it through carefully. You know it could move the conversation forward. You even begin to raise your hand, then stop. A single thought quietly interrupts you. What if it's a stupid idea? So you remain silent. The meeting continues. A few minutes later, someone else shares almost the exact same idea. People nod. The room becomes engaged. The idea is praised, and all you can think is, "I was going to say that." Most people believe moments like these happen because they lack confidence. But confidence isn't the real problem. The real problem is prediction. Long before reality has a chance to unfold, the mind begins writing its own version of events. It imagines rejection, embarrassment, failure, humiliation. Then it prepares the body to survive experiences that exist only in imagination. Think about how extraordinary that is. You didn't stay silent because people rejected your idea. You stayed silent because your mind predicted they would. Your decision wasn't shaped by reality. It was shaped by an expectation of reality. That distinction changes everything. This is how invisible prisons are built, not through facts, but through forecasts. The human brain is one of nature's greatest prediction machines. Every moment, it asks the same question: what happens next? Most of the time, this ability protects us. It allows us to anticipate danger, adapt to uncertainty, and prepare for what lies ahead. Without it, survival would be impossible. But fear has a way of borrowing the mind's greatest strengths. When fear takes control, prediction slowly becomes pessimism. Possibility gives way to probability, and probability quietly becomes certainty. You no longer imagine giving a presentation that goes well. You imagine forgetting your words. You don't picture introducing yourself with confidence. You picture people silently judging you. You don't imagine asking an honest question. You imagine becoming the smartest person's private joke, without realizing it. Your imagination stops expanding your future. It begins shrinking it. This is why the fear of judgment is so powerful. It doesn't need the world to reject you. It convinces you to reject yourself first. Few prisons are more effective than the ones that persuade their prisoners to guard the door themselves. Because a prison built by someone else has visible walls. A prison built by your own expectations travels with you. It follows you into every room, every opportunity, every relationship, every version of the life you might have lived. The question, then, isn't whether people judge us. Sometimes they do. The more important question is this: how many opportunities have we surrendered to judgments that never existed outside our imagination? Answer that honestly. And you begin to see how much of life is shaped, not by reality, but by the stories we fear might become reality. The judge inside your head. Imagine you've just finished giving a presentation. The room applauds. A colleague tells you your ideas were insightful. Someone else says you explained a difficult subject with remarkable clarity. By every visible measure, it went well. Yet on your way home, your mind refuses to replay any of that. Instead, it returns to a single sentence you stumbled over, a slide you almost skipped, a pause that lasted only a few seconds, moments that almost no one else noticed. Become the only moments you remember. It's a curious habit of the human mind. 100 pieces of evidence can suggest that everything went well, yet one imperfection can convince us that everything went wrong. Why? Because the harshest judge we encounter is rarely another person. It's the voice we've quietly learned to trust inside our own minds. What's remarkable about this inner judge isn't that it speaks. It's that it speaks with absolute certainty. It doesn't whisper, "Perhaps you embarrassed yourself." It declares, "You embarrassed yourself." It doesn't wonder, "Maybe no one noticed." It insists, "Everyone noticed." Certainty gives authority to thoughts that have never been tested against reality. And because those thoughts sound convincing, we rarely stop to question whether they're true. Imagine your closest friend making the very same mistake. Would you speak to them the way you speak to yourself? Would you reduce their entire effort to one imperfect moment? Would you ignore everything they did well, simply because they stumbled once? Probably not. You'd remind them that no one is flawless. You'd tell them that mistakes are quickly forgotten. You'd encourage them to keep going. Yet when the mistake belongs to us, compassion suddenly disappears. The standards change. Perfection quietly becomes the minimum requirement. Anything less begins to feel like failure. Over time, living under those impossible standards reshapes the way we move through life. We stop taking healthy risks. We hesitate before speaking honestly. We avoid experiences that might reveal our imperfections, not because we're incapable, but because we're trying to protect ourselves from a judge who is almost impossible to satisfy. The irony is difficult to see while we're living it. Every opportunity we avoid appears to prove that the inner judge was right. Every silence strengthens its authority. Every retreat becomes another piece of evidence that visibility is dangerous. Slowly, the mind learns a lesson that was never actually true. If I stay invisible, I can't be hurt. But safety has a price. The life that exists beyond fear slowly fades into possibility instead of reality. Potential becomes memory before it ever becomes experience. And that is the quiet tragedy of the invisible prison. It doesn't simply keep us from failing. It keeps us from discovering who we might have become if we had been willing to be seen. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that nobody was keeping score. Nobody remembers that awkward sentence you said 3 months ago. Nobody is still thinking about the embarrassing moment that has followed you for years. Nobody spent their evening replaying your mistakes because they were far too busy replaying their own. How differently would you live? Would you finally start the business you've been postponing? Would you speak up during the meeting instead of waiting for certainty? Would you wear what genuinely feels like you instead of what attracts the least attention? Would you apply for the opportunity you've already convinced yourself you won't get? Would you finally tell someone what you've been afraid to say? For many people, the greatest limitation in life isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't a lack of talent. It isn't even a lack of opportunity. It's spending years asking permission from an audience that was never truly watching. This doesn't mean you'll never be judged. You will. Judgment is part of every life lived in the open. Every artist has been criticized. Every entrepreneur has been doubted. Every leader has been misunderstood. Every thinker has been dismissed before they were understood. Judgment is not the price of failure. It's the price of visibility. Trying to avoid it completely doesn't protect your life. It only makes your life smaller. The goal, then, isn't to eliminate judgment. That has never been possible. The goal is to stop giving imagined judgment more authority than reality deserves. The next time you catch yourself thinking, "They're probably judging me," pause for a moment. Ask yourself one simple question. Do I actually know that's true? Or am I filling silence with a story? That question seems almost too simple. Yet it has the power to interrupt years of unconscious thinking, because most invisible prisons aren't built in a single day, and they rarely disappear in one. They begin with repeated assumptions, and they dissolve through repeated awareness. One belief questioned, one fear challenged, one courageous decision at a time. Freedom doesn't begin when the world finally stops judging you. Freedom begins when other people's opinions stop defining the boundaries of your identity. And perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. The prison felt permanent, because you never thought to test the door. But the door was never locked. It was built from assumptions mistaken for facts, predictions mistaken for reality, and fear mistaken for truth. The moment you begin questioning those assumptions, the walls become thinner, the prison becomes smaller, and eventually, you realize there was never anything standing between you and the life you wanted, except the permission you were waiting to give yourself. Think deeper, go beyond average, go